Hello everybody, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have 5 cards using the My Favorite Things Icing on the Cupcake card kit. I did have an unboxing, so I will have that linked down below if you're interested. The kit is no longer available, but I will have all the products linked separately because they do still have those as far as I know. So let's go ahead and get started with our first card. This one uses just some of that white cardstock, that smooth white that came in the kit. I just cut this down a little bit. And I'm going to take the stencil, the sprinkles stencil, and I'm going to tape it down using some washi tape. I want this to be on a hinge. And originally I had a plan to have it on a hinge because I wanted to turn the cardstock, but then I just decided not to do that. So I'm going to pull out some of my Favorite Things inks. I don't have a lot of them, but this first color is the Daffodil ink. I'm using a makeup brush to blend that around just on that upper right quadrant, and I didn't do a very good job of cleaning off my brush, and so I go into the bubblegum ink, and you can tell it didn't do a very good job. So I grab another makeup brush, and then I'm going to try again, and then I'm going to make sure and really clean off those brushes before I move on to the Gumdrop green, and I think that worked well. And then I'm also going to do the Summer Splash. And then once I'm happy with the blend, which didn't take long because I love rainbow colors and I thought this worked nicely, I'm going to pull that out, clean up my mess, and then I'm going to take one of my rectangle stitch dies and run this through my die cutting machine. So I have that one cut down, and then I also cut down a piece of the pattern paper that didn't come in the kit, but I did get it free with a $50 purchase. And so I cut one of those down to be the exact size of an A2 size card. As you can see, I did a ton of die cutting with the die that came in the kit and all of the colors of the cardstock. I basically cut out 2 wrappers from each one. Some of them I cut out tops, and then the rest I did the sprinkles and the little circle confetti. And so I have a bunch of those all lined up and ready to just start making cards. I'm taking some of that lavender cardstock, and I stamped out the sentiment from there. I did use a magic powder bag on it. I stamped it with Versamark ink and then covered that with some alabaster embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. And then I'm going to heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then when that is all melted, I will trim that down just using my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer. Kind of trying to see where I want the icing on the cupcake. So once I've figured out where I want that, I'm going to tack that down with a little bit of washi tape, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. I do plan to make this a shaker. Somehow I lost the footage of it, but I did take some 1/8 inch score tape on the front part of the shaker pouch, and then I adhered that to the front of my card panel. And then I'm putting in some sprinkles that I had cut out. Those were all inside some little bead trays. And I'm also going to pull in some of this Nuvo this is the Nuvo Hot Pink Stars. And I'm just going to use my spoon, put a few of those in there, and I am taking a small piece of acetate and putting some of that 1/8 inch score tape all around the edges of that. Max is extremely interested in my score tape there, along with every other little piece that I have on my table. Sometimes it's funny, he will just sit and watch. Sometimes he wants everything to do with all that I am doing. So right now he's just sitting and watching, and pretty soon he'll be right back in there trying to get a hold of it. Maybe he doesn't like my color combo, I'm not sure. But life is quite an adventure with he and his brother. Alright, I'm going to attach my card panel to my other card panel, my pattern paper panel, just using some liquid glue. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll adhere that down, and then I'm going to start getting ready to adhere the other pieces. So to put those down, I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of those. But before we do that, we'll watch Max play a little bit because it's cute, and I'm obsessed with him. I wish Miles would come in sometimes a little bit more, but he just isn't that interested. All right, we've put the foam tape on the back of the cupcake liner. We'll put that down, and then we put foam tape down on the back of our sentiment as well. So we're going to try to manipulate this a little bit, try and make sure that it's straight, and kind of want it to look like the cupcake liner is sitting on top of it. That was a challenge. Probably should have figured that out a little bit better, but it works. We're able to manipulate it enough to make it work. So, and then once I'm happy with that, I will adhere the card panel down to my card base, which is some of the green cardstock that came in the kit. And then we're going to move on to the inside. So I'm going to take one of the leftover strips of that pattern paper from the front, and I'll just adhere that to the bottom. And then I'll pick out my sentiment. I'm going to ink that up with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Such a crisp black ink. It's just perfect for sentiments. And then I'll take the purple cupcake liner, or the lavender one, and adhere that down with some glue. And then I'm also going to take the icing from earlier that's from the front of the card and adhere that, as well as one of the little cherries. But I don't stop there. I do add a little bit of embellishment on the outside. We're going to take some Nuvo crushed grapes. This is just the Nuvo drops, and I'll put a few drops down of that. And then I'm going to tap that down onto my glass matte surface just to get those to kind of even out a little bit. And then that's going to finish off our first card. Started off with a little bit of a fun one there by doing a shaker. Okay, moving on to card number 1. I have already cut out, like I said, a bunch of those pieces of, I guess that's the frosting. And so this first one you're going to see me do, I'm just dipping it into my Versamark ink, and I'm going to cover it with some of this Brutus Monroe Rainbow Sparkle embossing powder. It's just basically a clear embossing powder with a lot of just glittery sparkle in it, and so it's fantastic. And if I had been thinking, I would have done this to start with, as you're seeing. I would have made a handle to start, because as I was doing it, I was thinking, how am I going to heat emboss this without burning my fingers? Well, a handle. I've seen other YouTubers do it, and so this is nothing new, but I do it from here on out this way. And so I'm just heating that till it is smooth and melted, and then I'll move on to my next 3. So I have 3 left that I'm doing. I'm going to do that green, like a peach color, and then the pink, and again, just pushing it into the Versamark ink, covering it with the Rainbow Sparkle embossing powder, which is gorgeous. That one is quickly becoming one of my favorites. I love it. And then I will show you up close what that looks like. So it keeps its color, the cardstock color, but then it just gets shiny and it's got all this beautiful glitter in it. All right, so now I'm going to I'm going to use the Hey There Cupcake die that came free with 60. And I'm going to keep all the little pieces in case I decide to use those for a card later. But instead of using the little pieces, I'm going to use the negative space. And I'm going to take some black cardstock, cut that down, and I'm going to cover the back with that. So I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid glue all around the outside of that. And then I'll just tack down my black cardstock. And then I'll flip it over and you'll see that I've got the Hey There. I did keep the R and the little piece inside the R, so I'm just going to take a drop of liquid glue, adhere down the R into there, and then use my paper piercer to make sure that it's in there good, and then I can peel away the rest of the R. And then we'll trim that down and we'll be ready to use it later. So I'm going to trim that down with my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer. Now remember, this is 2 pretty thick pieces of cardstock stuck together, so the guillotine trimmer is like the best thing for this, and I am having to kind of pump it with the heel of my hand a little bit, and it's no big deal. It cuts through really pretty easily. All right, I did cut down some of the dark pink cardstock, and I am going to run that through my Xyron sticker maker, because for the word cupcake, I actually want to run that through about 3 times because I want to stack that up. So this was the easiest way with a die that is fairly intricate like the word cupcake for me to do. And so just run that through my Xyron sticker maker 3 times, and then I'll start stacking all of those on top of each other. And the nice thing about the Xyron sticker machines is once you peel off the back of the paper, it doesn't totally stick until you really push down and then kind of leave it alone. So you do have some wiggle room, which is really, really nice. But yeah, and so then I'll leave the release paper on the back of that last one that's on the bottom until I'm ready to adhere it down to my card front. And I trimmed down some more of that patterned paper. And I also cut one of the cupcake liners out of some of the white cardstock, and I'm using a C1 Copic, and then I realized that really wasn't quite dark enough for what I was hoping. So I bring in the C3, and then I'm going to bring in the C1 one more time to kind of blend that out just a little bit better. But I like that because then it just gives a little bit of shadowing and shading to the cupcake liner. And then we're going to start grabbing our pieces and adhering those down to our card base. And so I'm using liquid glue to do so. And I'll just adhere down the one piece of the pattern paper, and then I'll use the glue to adhere down the other piece. I just trimmed that down a little bit smaller than the front of an A2 size card so that the striped rainbow would show through on that left-hand side. And then we're going to start adhering our cupcake frosting to each other. I wanted these to be really stacked up there, and I thought it would be fun to kind of stagger them a little bit, make it look like they're not quite totally falling over, but that they're all staggered and they're not perfectly straight. So I'm using a little bit of glue on the bottom, a little bit of glue on the top back part of the frosting, and then I'll do that all the way down for all 4 of those. And I just think it's fun. And it's that rainbow pattern that I just love. So, and then once that last one is adhered, we're going to adhere that down to the white cupcake liner, just using a small thin line of that liquid glue. And then we'll get ready to adhere the rest of our pieces to the front of our card. So here's where I've got my hey there trimmed down and ready to adhere just with some liquid glue. And yeah, I've got it hanging off the side, but I'll obviously trim that down. I'll peel off the release paper on the back of the word cupcake, and then I'll stick that down and make sure that that's adhered pretty well. And then I'll use the same liquid glue that I've been using on the back of the cupcake with all of its delicious frosting. And I'll tack that down as well. I thought about using some foam tape, but I thought there was a little bit going on with this card, so it didn't necessarily need it. And then I'll color the stem of the cherry and adhere that down as well. And then we're going to move on to the inside of our card, because I have to now, after I trim off that excess piece. And for the inside, I just stamped out "Wishing you a sweet day," and then I'm going to tack down a blue cupcake liner, and then a white bit of frosting, and then another cherry on top of that. And that'll finish off the inside, but for a final bit of embellishment on the outside, we're going to use some of the Nuvo drops in the color Simply White. Just a few of them. I thought it would really add to the dots that are already on that pattern paper, and it just was fun. Didn't take away from the cupcake, but I like that. So there's card number 2. For card number 4, because I had so many of those cupcake pieces cut out, I decided to cut out the frosting using one of the pattern papers. I thought that would be cute because it kind of looked like it already had sprinkles on it. And now I'm just going to kind of try to arrange those on the front of one of the pieces of cardstock that came in the kit. So I'll leave the background plain because there will be a lot going on with all of these different cupcakes. I'm going to attach all of the frosting to the cupcakes, which I probably should have done later because I do decide to add a little bit of texture and dimension to these cupcake liners by adding some Copic markers. So it would have been smarter for me to wait, but I don't know. Anyway, when I was originally looking at these cupcake liners and with everything done, I was like, oh, they look good. But then I was like, but they look really flat. So that's why I brought in the Copic colors. And I just thought that was so much fun to do. So I do it for all of them. And then it just adds so much to it. It's amazing how much it adds to it. This purple one I did go a little bit dark on. So I will bring in a lighter purple to kind of lighten that up a little bit. Copics don't necessarily work the best on cardstock like this. They kind of just soak into the paper a little bit more, and but you can definitely see on this darker cardstock that it stays wet longer. So once it dries, it really kind of calms down just a little bit. So like I said, we'll just finish those all up, and then we're going to come in with a C3 marker and put that on the frosting just to add a little bit of dimension to the frosting, like there's actually a swirl in it, which is kind of fun. So we do it to all of those. My Copic is definitely needing to be refilled, so I'm going to have to stop after this and get it refilled. And then we'll start arranging all of those on there. So I kind of try to go in rainbow order from top to bottom. So as you can tell, I did that darker pink, light orange, light yellow, dark orange, and then green, and light blue, and then the lavender. And so to cut off all the excess pieces, I just go ahead and stick this into my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer. It makes taking that off so much easier. And I'll flip it around and do it to all of the sides, and then this is what we're left with. I did go ahead off screen. I stamped out the sentiment on some black cardstock with a Versamark pad, and then covered that with some white embossing powder, and then heat set that till that was smooth and melted. I put my foam tape right onto my card panel, and now I'm just adjusting that and kind of lining that up on my glass mat. And then I'll turn that over and I'll trim off all of the excess. I do decide for that last one to put it into my guillotine trimmer because I have a lot of little bits hanging off still. So then I'll refresh and cut all the rest of those off. Then I'll take my cherry and I'm going to color that one up just a little bit, just using a couple different Copics. That dark pink was a little bit dark, so we're going to come in with a lighter pink. And then off screen, I actually did come in with a white number 8 Sakura jelly roll pen, and I added a bunch of highlights to the cupcake liners as well as this cherry, which you will see in the picture afterwards. But I love how that turned out. So I put one cherry on there and then stamped the cherry on top on the inside. But see, there's the highlights you can see. I really do like how this one turned out. All right, moving on to card number 4. I'm going to start with one of the, I guess, frostings, and we're going to add this really cool product to it. To start, I am using a Brutus Monroe embossing pen. I love this pen because it just gives you embossing ink where you need it, which is awesome. And then I'm going to be using the Marshmallow Puff embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. This stuff is really, really cool. So it definitely puffs up, not like crazy, but it definitely puffs up and adds lots of texture. And I thought it would be really cool to add like a whipped cream texture to my frosting. So I'll show you up close what it looks like. It has this really cool texture on it, and I can see using this for all kinds of products or projects, but I thought it was definitely fun for this. I did decide I wanted to make this card a fun fold card, so I'm scoring it at 4 1/4 inches. I had cut it to 5.5 by 11.5, and then scored it at 4 1/4, and then I scored it again at 2 1/8 and folded it back. So if you look at it, it looks like it's kind of partially open, which is kind of neat. And I trimmed down my pattern paper to be about 2 inches by 5 1/4 inches, so that it'll have a nice little border on top, the left hand, and the bottom sides. I cut out a couple of circles using the wonky stitched circle dies. I'll end up using that again. And then I'm going to kind of try to place my cupcake and all of its elements on there. Yesterday or the other day I had mentioned that I wasn't sure what one of those pieces was for in the die, and I realized it today when I was making this, that those pieces were the extras so that you could combine things on top of each other. And the cherry can even be done that way too, so that you could cut out the whole thing in like brown or something and then put the other cherry on top of that, so that you don't have to try and color like I did with the cherry previously, or even on this candle. So it's all good. I was able to cut it out, the candle one with the flame and everything, out of yellow, and then I cut the extra piece out of orange. Now I'm going to start adhering all those pieces to my white circle, just using some of that liquid glue. And then I'll adhere down my candle as well using that same liquid glue. And then I'm going to add a few of the sprinkles that I had made using my crystal katana along with that same liquid glue. So I'm using the lavender to start, and I'll put 3 of those down, and then I'm going to add 3 more lines to be able to put some of those turquoise blue. I guess it's blue raspberry. And so that's fun. It adds this other texture of sprinkles onto my cupcake. And I'll adhere that down to the blue circle. And then this is where I've decided I definitely need to have more. So I cut those out 3 more times. So my circle is going to end up being 4 thick. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want it to be flimsy, since half of it will be hanging off of the card. And I did the same thing with my sentiment. So I stamped my sentiment using some Versamark ink like I did previously, and then covered that with some white embossing powder and heat set that. And then I'm just going to stack all of these strips on top of each other. They'll end up being a little bit too big for my sentiment, but that's okay. I'll just trim those down with some scissors, no big deal. And then once I get those all trimmed and ready to go, we'll adhere half of that to that portion of the card, because the other half will be sticking off. So now they're nice and sturdy, and I don't have to worry about them like getting bent too easily. So that way when you close the card, you have half showing. I did have a little extra glue, but it was pretty easy to clean up. So there we are. There's card number 4, and I just think it's fun sometimes to do something a little different like that. For our final card today, we're going to make another shaker. I went ahead and cut out a bunch of the elements using an old My Favorite Things die that I had. It was a die set. I think it was a Blueprints like 29. And just can't get rid of it, even though you can't get it anymore. But I cut out a bunch of the elements. And let me tell you my thought process for the colors that I chose. I actually chose the colors based off of rainbow order. So my card base was going to be yellow, or pink. Then I was moving on to orange for one of my card panels. Then another was yellow, and then we have the green stripes, and so on and so forth, although it just doesn't translate to rainbow in my opinion. That was actually my thought process. So you did see me put down some 1/8 inch score tape on the back of that one fishtail banner. Before I stuck that down, because I already pulled off the release paper, I did want the green stripes to be behind it. And so I'm lining it up on my glass mat, the 1/8 inch score tape. That way I figured it was the best way for me to make them as straight as I could get them. You could do it with liquid glue. You could totally skip this. You wouldn't have to do it this way. And so because it works out fine either way, really. So again, lining it up on my glass mat, just picking those pieces and then trying to get those down straight. That's where the glass mat comes in super, super handy. And then I'll put another one down. And then we'll put our last one down as well. So, and that's, you know, the green on the orange doesn't necessarily look great, but it is what it is. I told you my thought process. So I adhere all those pieces down, then I'm going to turn it over and trim off all of the excess just using my scissors. You could stick this into your guillotine trimmer if you have that. No big deal. And then I'll throw away all those excess pieces, and then we are going to put down our circle. So the circle is going to just sort of be the base for our cupcake. So I'll tack that down with a little bit of liquid glue. Try and figure out where I want my frosting to be, because that's where I'm going to have to stick my die. And so I'll put the cupcake liner in there, and then I'll grab the die and just stick that right down on top, and then I'll put a little washi tape there to hold that in place. Now, if you're looking at that, obviously it means that's got to go through 3 layers. Well, the pattern paper's pretty thin, so I'm not too worried about it. I do run it through my die cutting machine about maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I'll pull that out, and it didn't get all the way through there at the bottom, but it got through enough that I could very easily just take my scissors and kind of trim away. It was enough that it just barely almost tore away. If I had really tried, I probably could have just pulled it, but I didn't want to risk tearing it, so I did that. And then our little shaker element fits in there perfectly. I will take some of that 1/8 inch score tape and go all the way around my cupcake, peel off all the release paper, and then I'll stick that inside of the hole. Then I've decided I want to back that with the turquoise, so I'm going to take some of that 1/8 inch score tape and go all the way around so that it'll fit nicely over the top of that cupcake, or over the frosting. And then I'm going to grab all of the lavender and the turquoise sprinkles that I had left over, and then I just couldn't resist. I had to add some glitter. I mean, it's a great place to add it, especially if you don't really like glitter, because it keeps it all contained right in there. And then it adds this sparkly effect, and who doesn't love a little sparkle? All right, I'll peel off all the release paper on that blue raspberry paper and stick that down, making sure that I have it really well adhered, because you don't want any of that glitter coming out of there. And then I'm going to take that liquid glue and put it all over the back of this piece, and I'll adhere it down to my card base. Then we'll take our liner, our cupcake liner, and stick that down. And I did off-screen stamp the sentiment onto some more of that lavender cardstock using some white. And then I'm just going to stick that down with some liquid glue. I thought that matched nicely. And then I'm going to add my cherries. So I end up having to cut out one more, but I added a couple of those cherries down at the bottom, and then one cherry to the top of our little shaker. And I also ended up adding some Nuvo drops in the color Ebony. I don't show you that, but I do add a few of those. And then I stamp just a sentiment on the inside. Didn't go too crazy with these insides. So here it is. And as I open it, I'm going to get my finger in one of those. Thankfully, it does not ruin my Nuvo drop, but it's on my finger. So that's actually going to finish off card number 5. And I do like the way that one turned out. Let's go ahead and take a look at how all of our cards came together. So here's our first one and our second one. I would love to know if you had a favorite out of the cards that I made today. Just go ahead and leave that down in the comments section. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I typically have 3 to 4 videos a week, and I would love it if you kept coming by. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye, everybody.